Welcome to Trending in Education. Mike Bomber here. I'm joined today by Matt Dalio, who's the founder and CEO of Endless. We're going to be talking games. We're going to be talking about education and the work he's been doing for a little bit of time here. Matt, welcome to Trending in Education.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
It's great to have you. I love talking e-learning. I'm going to want to get your take on gamification, but games as sort of a format for kids to think about learning, and then game design in particular as a place where teaching kids how to design games, can kind of move the needle in interesting ways. We'll get into that in a bit, and I'll try to rep for my 6-year-old appropriately about game design and how he can learn it. Before we do that, can we start with your background, however you feel like sharing it, your professional origin story?
I'll start as a 3-year-old and it'll go quick. But when I was 3, I went to China for the first time. When I was 11 years old, my parents put me on a plane, shipped me to China, and I lived with a Chinese family going to an all-Chinese school for a year.
Wow.
11. That changed my life. That changed my perspective. It changed everything about my life. And then when I was 16, I spent a summer in an orphanage, kind of wanting to go back and do something to get into college, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the next domino of my life. It ended up turning into a foundation that I started for about a decade. And so the yearning to help people and realize, like, I literally would hold a child who was going to die and then get them a surgery, and then the child was alive, and later child, and they're in a family, like that rewires you. And so my whole life basically since then has been, how do I help people? And I was helping people one at a time, but I always, thought, how do I help people at scale? And I also knew, I came from a business family, a business dinner table conversation.
Tell your dad I loved his book.
Oh, good. I'll pass it along.
Yeah.
It is a good book. He's got a couple of good books, actually.
Principles was the one. I was just sort of imagining growing up in a household where the mastermind behind Principles is also your dad.
There were a lot of principles in the house. There are a lot of those for us.
That book is great.
The other one to include is The Changing World Order, which talks about kind of where we are in the macro cycles of how countries go broke. He's a macroeconomist, for those who don't know, who kind of global trends.
Yeah, Ray Dalio, right?
Yeah, and an investor.
Yeah.
How countries go broke is, unfortunately the most recent.
Yeah. But anyway, so this sort of got you this window into, both your dad's thinking, but also getting around the world and getting involved in sort of more of a philanthropic side, and how can you make an impact and help? And this eventually evolves into what you're doing with Endless.
Exactly. So I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, and I knew, I was super excited by what was happening in tech, and I figured, okay, if I can get to Stanford Business School, I can kind of use that as my launch pad.
Yeah.
2010, and it kind of all came full circle on this trip to India when I realized smartphones, I'm going to take on a quick tangent. Smartphones were about to sweep across emerging markets at the time.
Right.
I think there was 2% penetration in India.
Yeah.
I realized everyone has TVs. If you just plug a smartphone into the TV, all of a sudden they can have a computer. And at the time, everyone thought the computer was going to be dead. But I was like, but I still use a computer. Everyone I know still uses a computer. It's still the work tool.
Yeah.
And if you study, you get a white collar job, then you need to study.
You need that big keyboard. You need the form factor. Yeah.
You need the small buttons with the mouse and
all that.
And the screen. And so from there, I was like, well, wow, what if you could get billions of people computers, because they're already going to have, smartphones. And so a very, very long journey that I'll just kind of jump over, although we still do it. And I'm very, very, very passionate about it. I was just with the head of Acer in the region a moment ago, talking about exactly this. So still very much living it. But for the sake of today, what I realized in this journey of trying to get kids technology in emerging markets was that then once they have the technology, you have to teach them. You have to get them the skills, because it's the skills the goals that get them the job. The technology.
I believe it's the skills that pay the bills, Matt.
So I hear. So we try to teach. And so then the question is, how do you teach them? And how do you teach them high value, high income, global skills in a world where, like, when you go to Guatemala, 90% of the math teachers in many parts of that country cannot pass the math exam that they're supposed to do. So how the hell are you going to teach them to be like, global software citizens, in that world? Seems bonkers. And yet what I realized was 2 insights that were huge, huge insights in retrospect. It was kind of a series of little insights that all connected. But the first was, we would deploy those laptops, and we put this little math game called Tux Math. It was a Linux game from, I think, 2001. Numbers fall from the sky and you shoot the numbers. I'd walk into classrooms full of kids shouting their multiplication tables at each other.
Yeah.
Like you could hear yourself think
Right.
about math, multiplication tables.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, wow, games, let's go teach some, stuff through
Yeah.
games.
Right.
And that was the first insight. And then the second insight, which was actually the bigger insight, was that I was curious. I actually never learned to code, but there were a couple moments in my life where I almost did. And
Yeah.
we were hiring these amazing Linux engineers. Like if you go to GitHub, which is like the place that all software takes, is built, and you go
Yeah.
look at the number one contributors to the Linux desktop top stack, like we were hiring these people and I was getting to speak to them. And I was just curious, like, what was your journey? How did you
Yeah.
learn? What
Right.
did you do that I did wrong? That
Yeah.
I didn't. And I found the same answer almost every time. And it was, I remember the first time I heard it, and it was a guy who was kind of sheepish. And he's like, well, it's kind of embarrassing, but I really liked games as a kid.
Huh.
And then I discovered I could hack my games.
Mm.
It was more fun to hack my games than to play my games.
Yeah.
And then I heard someone else say that. And then someone else say that. And then someone else say that. And then I read an article and realized that Elon Musk learned this way. And then another one.
Yeah.
And then Mark Zuckerberg learned this way. And like
Huh.
Demis Hassabis, who built the foundational technology behind DeepMind and just won a Nobel Prize for AI, learned that way.
Right. Right.
Like
Yeah.
almost every engineer I speak to these days is like, that was how I got started too.
Yeah.
So it begs this question. Well, if that's how all of these great tech entrepreneurs got started, then why aren't we teaching this way?
Right. Right.
And so in retrospect, if you kind of look back on it, and, people talk about screen time. That's one of the questions that I'm sure you'll want to ask. And I've got lots of
Yeah.
thoughts on screen time, most of which is when kids are young, don't give them screens. It's
Right.
scary, right?
Yeah.
I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Yeah. I got it. Like I said, a 6-year-old,
and
and it's like kryptonite, Yeah.
yeah, it's like a strange combination between like heroin and kryptonite.
Yeah.
Kryptonite brain and heroin because they want it, right? Good and
Oh
bad.
my God. That's true. Because you don't want kryptonite. Fair point. Yes. It's like kryptonite that you love. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
worse.
exactly. At a young age, I'm very clear. Don't give them screens. At an old age, what is it you do in a white collar job? You sit in front of a screen
That's true.
and you do high power things.
Yeah.
And so somewhere between like, my 7-month-old who I do not want to have, and like a 22-year-old is like, I'm graduating into the workforce and like,
Right.
AI is here. How do I be ready to be a superhuman with AI?
Right.
Somewhere on that journey is let's go prepare them for this thing.
Right. Right. And that's where the skills that pay the bills, but also it's the ability to like make things and like do something
100%.
productive, creative.
So this is actually one of the things that if you go back to the smartphone computer thing, the smartphone is a consumption device. I sit in front of TikTok and I scroll, or I play a game and I tap glass, as I often describe. Like it is not a creation device. It is a consumption device.
Yeah.
The computer, why do you need a keyboard? Why do you need a mouse? You need those things because you are creating, you are doing, you are, in lean forward mode rather than let me go lean back in the couch.
Yeah.
So the way we look at these things is what is our goal? Our goal is to take kids from being consumers and turn them into creators.
Yeah.
And the more active they are, the more agency they have, the more powerful they are, the more enabled they are. It's like, we like Legos. Okay, well, what if their Legos were, building, crazy pieces of software, not just as coders, by the way, as 3D modelers and designers, project managers, marketers.
It's all good. Come on, it's all going to be vibes. We're going to just vibe everything,
Exactly. And that's actually a really, really important point, because with AI coming along and, some people saying very, respectable people saying that half of white collar jobs are about to go away.
Right.
And then there's people, saying, well, the new jobs are coming.
Right.
Well, let's train people to do the new jobs.
Right. Or those people have to define the new jobs for themselves. Is it like mid-career?
Yes.
That's a big aspect of like advancing. I was in a big, corporate organization where, there's enough of us around that you have to play with your head up. And if you see an emerging trend like mobile phones, which was a huge transformation, 15 years ago, this is bigger, and then for those of us old enough to remember how the internet hit, there are these waves of technology transformation that come through. And through all of that, what you're talking about, the durable skills that you're talking about, is more like a mindset of a game designer, of someone who can kind of create. Hacking was an interesting word choice. The idea that you figure out so much how the thing works that you can then start to engineer it yourself.
Completely. So the first thing I should say is that coding is one of what we define as kind of like 5 core disciplines. So but it's also design, digital art, it's management, things like product and project management, and it's marketing or go to market, business analysis, data analytics, strategy, all that.
Makes
So
sense.
those
Yeah.
the five core disciplines. And from there, you have these branching kind of skill trees that go
Interesting.
into deeper things. Digital art is 3D modeling. 3D
Yeah.
modeling is architecture and industrial design and mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
So you can take a young human and get them passionate about those five disciplines, teach them the
Yeah.
basics of each of the five, and then help them discover which of the five they're most passionate about. And often
Yeah.
it'll be multiple of them, and you fuse them.
Mhm.
And then you build those skills when they're young. Well,
Yeah.
then when they're older, they're going to be good at the core underlying skill, whether it's them 3D modeling a car in the
Right.
automotive industry.
I frequently try to take a step back from skill sets and start thinking about mindsets. They have a longer shelf life where the types of skills you
Yes.
do to create 3D models are probably going to have to change.
Yes.
And then to me, the mindset is like, oh, then I better be a lifelong learner. I might just always need to be upskilling, reskilling, playing with my head up. Like that's like the model of a future employee. And then to your education
Complete.
point, then how do you build programs for learners? How does that work? Like, what's some examples of the types of programs that you offer?
Well, so I want to talk about mindsets
Please.
before
Yeah.
we go there and then
Yeah.
infuse the answer to that question into it because
Yeah.
it's such an important point. Skill sets, mindsets. Mindsets, like when you are hiring an employee or you have a high performing employee, what do you want? You want someone who can see the goal to help you define the goal
Yeah.
and figure out creatively how to get there and be autonomous and
Mhm.
agentic in getting there. And
Yes.
then also work collaboratively with the team so that they're leveraged through that team and can be a combination of a leader and a co-leader,
Yeah.
collaborator to
Yeah.
get to a goal. And school is the complete opposite of that. We sit in front of textbooks and then we could, consume with someone sitting in front of us. And then we
Yeah.
graduate high school and we go to college and we do more of that. And then we graduate from
Yeah.
college. And then it's like, oh, that's the workforce. Well, why
Yeah.
didn't we teach that when they were like 12 years old? Why didn't we teach
Totally.
that when they were 15 years old? If
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what workforce is. So the way we think about what we have to do is the core of it is to give someone the experience of being in the workforce when they're younger than the workforce.
Yeah.
And so we bring people together into teams and we have them work on real projects.
Yeah.
And we think about it as like the practice project. So you as a little, you come kids build together. And then we will train you with the skill sets for you to actually be able to work on professional projects.
Yeah. And the target age is it's like high
We
school into
mostly,
college.
yeah, we mostly focus on college and high school kind of in that order.
Okay.
With time we'll move to younger audiences.
So
But
very much, we talk a lot about the future of work. So very much in sort of that vein, in that jobs are
it's
changing, and then how quickly can post-secondary and K-12 programs kind of adjust to these
correct.
skill sets that are changing real fast, and then focusing specifically in like the game design.
How do we prepare people for the workforce across
Yeah.
all the other industries? That's
Yeah.
one of the big misconceptions. We don't care about the game industry. I mean, I say that a little
I
bit hyper,
see.
but it's 0.0004% of global jobs. So
Right.
we're not trying to train, a
Yeah.
billion.
They're nice jobs, but yeah.
They're nice jobs, but there are, 3 billion people under the age of 25 years old right now. That's
Right.
the number.
Yeah.
And we as society have to prepare the 3 billion people for the future workforce.
Right.
All the jobs that will be wiped away and all the jobs that will replace them, and
Right.
so how do you make 3 billion literate people in a world where literacy looks very different than the old form of literacy?
Right.
That's the global problem statement.
Yeah.
And just to kind of double click into that problem statement, a world, you know, we either have like the bright future ahead of us as humanity or one of the darkest futures ahead of us as
Yeah.
humanity. I often ask people, which one do you think it is? And people's hands all, often go up for
Yeah.
both. Like,
We're very binary too. It's probably going to be somewhere in the middle, but yeah.
exactly. It's going to be somewhere in there. And from my perspective, the thing that will determine where we are across the two,
Yeah.
extremes will be, do people have jobs en
Hmm.
masse?
Right.
Because if you have mass unemployment, you have mass unrest. If you have
Right.
mass skilling and therefore people have the ability to have jobs in a world where AI is, here, what does that even look like is a whole
Right.
conversation worth having. But if
Yeah.
you say that, the majority of people can have jobs in that world and they're good jobs in that world, whoa,
Yeah.
we're going to have an amazing world because they're going to be superhumans empowered by AI solving all the other world's problems.
Right. Right. Lots at stake. And then it's very different than the traditional mission of early education. And then I guess you start to see it closer to high school and certainly in college, like more awareness lately around the disconnect between Gen Z coming out of college or just, choosing not to go to college, but just not really being effectively equipped to work in a professional setting. At the same time, AI is picking up a lot of that sort of intern level work. It's almost like the mindsets that you learn from game design and some of the stuff that you're doing together collaboratively is really equipping your students with
Yep.
what they need to be relevant in the future.
Yeah, this past year marked the first time that there are more Americans of high school age who do not want to go to college than want to go to college.
Yeah.
And that is for many reasons. It's been a trend for a long time, in part because of the cost of education
Yeah.
and the payoff of education declining on the other side.
Right.
The college grad that's an Uber driver.
Right. The some college, no degree is 43
Oh, it's
million.
huge.
Yeah. It's like many,
Yeah.
many people. It's arguably settled that the return on the degree it amortizes across your life. It's probably worth it. People should try to get that college degree. Its relevance in the job market is a separate problem, but like the sheepskin
Yes.
effect of getting the degree, it's worth pursuing. But it does seem like alternatives that sort of allow the people who can't get to that degree. Once you start on that path, there's an affordability.
Let's
There's an
get the
affordability.
college degree. Let's just be clear.
Yeah.
My opinion on that
Right.
one.
Right. But the
Just let it go.
affordability crisis and the sort of betrayal that folks can feel if they're like overcommitted to pursuing it and they're not quite there, they can't really finance that. And then, so anyways, there's a lot of issues with what's going on around that. I'm really curious with your global perspective. What do you notice? Because, I guess you've been global really since 11 or younger. It sounds like you've been able to kind of get around and then focusing on education. I imagine you can see things bubble up in ways that some of us who are maybe US focused don't. What do you see out there?
So that's why I was listening to one of the podcasts that you had previously, which is the 5 billion kids and what can you learn from 5 billion
Yes.
kids. I feel like for about a decade of my life, maybe more, that was my life, was just traveling across emerging markets for a period, traveling probably 200 days a year, and just speaking to kids in emerging markets about technology. What do you want in their programs, in their schools, and their everything? What do you want? What are your hopes? What are your fears? And there are about 1 billion kids, youth around the world of college age.
Yeah.
They can't go to college. And, there are 5 billion youth in the world. That's the name of that book.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's how do you teach them? And they're all hungry.
Mm-hmm.
They're almost all hungry. I think one of the big differences between America and the rest of the world is the hunger and the yearning and the value of an education.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I love, frankly, working in emerging markets, is because I just want to teach the kids who want to learn. I want to help you.
And the ROI is real and it's favorable to them because a lot of the stuff's getting cheaper, freer, available in their pocket, depending on what they're consuming.
Yeah. So my dream, just to kind of jump to at least one of the punchlines, is a world in which a college degree that prepares you better for the future with the actual stamp is free.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you get to free is you have to reduce cost, and you also can find clever ways of making it so that you can earn money to then pay for the thing that costs.
Yes.
And the combination of AI obviously reduces cost dramatically. But the second thing, which is huge, is the power of community.
Yeah.
I'll take a quick tangent here to talk about that GitHub that I mentioned before, because it's such an important thing. The best engineer we ever hired, and we hired from Red Hat. He was the best. We hired the head of the Red Hat desktop team.
They have a little red hat when he came in.
Yeah, the little fedoras. They do. And the interesting thing about this guy was that he was the best engineer. You could look quantitatively in GitHub at all the contributions.
Right.
2 or 3 times the next people down.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a high school diploma. He had spent his high school years and his college years and beyond immersed in this community called GitHub, in this community called Linux, building literally this Linux desktop operating system. Mm-hmm. And inside of it, he learned how to be better than all the Stanford grads that we hired, because we hired a pile of them. Got, premier degree at the number 1 or whatever it is, computer science course degree program you could take. And he was better with no college degree. Mm-hmm. And it's because he was doing the real thing in the place where the people who do the thing do the thing.
Right.
And the interesting thing about GitHub is that it's free to join. Mm-hmm. There's no cost. And so when you're in a community where people are working on a real project, and you have professionals who need other people to contribute things and are willing to give those people feedback so that the product that they are getting, the work product they're getting, is good enough to merge, that's
Yeah.
called mentorship.
Yeah.
It replicates the real world because it is the real world.
Hmm.
And so if you think of school as, well, let's just do that and let's give you, let's call it experience points or credit that
Yeah.
validate things that you is based on the actual contributions you're doing in a real world setting with professionals. Now all
Right.
of a sudden you are learning in a way that is totally different than like, could you pass the test or not?
Right.
And so the way we think about what we're doing is it's kind of like use the allure of video games. The average kid spends 10,000 hours playing video games by the time they graduate from school. They're virtually
Yeah.
so video games. By the
Yeah.
way, just comparison, they spend 16,000 hours in school.
Right.
16,000 hours in school, 10,000 hours in games on
Yeah.
average.
Yeah.
So let's take that, wasted playtime and let's turn it into really productive creation time where they're learning these skills. And then let's use that as the funnel to bring a lot of people into a community of practice that
Yeah.
gets better as more people join it. There are
Hmm.
100 million people in GitHub.
Yeah.
None of them are paying a penny for the learnings that they have
Right.
in GitHub. And so let's build games in this way. Our
Yeah.
real aspiration is let's have professional studios come in and build games. And the
Yeah.
studio's incentive, it's like I've got a swarm of people who are willing to help me build art
Yeah.
assets, build
Right.
levels, and
Play test. Yeah, for
and
sure.
play test and QA and
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
code game mechanics. And
Yeah.
when you swarm this talent
Yeah.
around games
Yeah.
that can actually monetize on the game side,
Right.
means is that the game side can pay the students.
Right. And to our previous point, you're sort of engendering a maker's mindset and saying, like, you with a team figuring out how to get it together are going to start building things, and those things are going to make an impact, and you're going to play with them, even though it is maybe that 0.4% of the job space. Taking a step back, it's almost like the professional game theory of game designers and like that market and that culture, to me, seems like a mindset and a mental model that's going to be useful as work is transformed. People are going to get more entrepreneurial. They're going to be making their own things, working in small groups. And then the types of stuff they build should be getting pretty cool. What kind of stuff are your teams building?
I'll give you an example. There's the really cool stuff that our teams are planning on building that I'm happy to talk about. It's the really cool stuff in terms of gameplay. But I actually want to talk about an example of what you just said. A student in Peru who was part of a university program, studying to be a computer scientist, but he'd never been in GitHub, which is actually where real software is built. Where our
Yeah.
program brings people into GitHub, and it's fascinating to watch the GitHub logs. Like you could see the comments going back and forth between the mentor and the student.
Hmm. Hmm.
One GitHub post of while they're trying to push something to the mainline game, you see how much the students learning in terms of how they
Yeah.
comment, in terms of the quality of the code, in terms of like them understanding how open source software is built, all within one page. It's amazing to see.
Yeah.
And the student's been part of a couple of programs. And so they went on to build a video game for rural communities in Peru for the students in these very poor, basically in the middle of nowhere schools to be able to keep and maintain their local language.
Mm.
And so that's one example of one student in one country who's building games to teach kids to keep their language, their heritage. It is a great example of what happens, like the derivative that comes from someone knowing how to build software and then going and taking it.
Yeah.
And my dream world of what this looks like in a decade and the decades beyond is not just that people are building games, although the cool thing about games, by the way, is that students play those games and then
Yeah.
they discover that they can also create games.
Right.
So it becomes our flywheel of like we
Hmm.
build a game, then people play it, and then they can discover they can
Yeah.
build a game and then makes more games.
Right.
But our real dream is that that student now goes on and one day is able to get a job. It could be at the electricity company, making the grid more efficient, which is
Right.
literally one of the engineers that we work with here in
Yeah.
UA. I don't care the industry. I just care that A, they have a job, and B, they're making the world better in whatever way they can. And they
Right.
have tools, therefore, to do that.
Yeah. We've talked about AI in a couple different capacities, but one of the things that folks are talking about is the role of the human developer versus AI, or in partnership with AI, the idea of like a co-pilot or, agents that can kind of help do like subroutines. And then, of course, I was joking a little bit about VOD coding, but in terms of future work, people are starting to imagine worlds where AI is picking up on some of the more traditional kind of coding things. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, great. It's perhaps the question of the day. I wrote a blog post that talks about the kind of 5 layers of what it means to teach AI.
Yeah.
First layer, it's the thing that people think of most of the time, which is like prompt engineering, right? But that's like being like, I'm going to teach you how to Google things, 20
Yes.
years ago. Like, yeah, it's an important skill, but and prompt engineering is way more powerful than Googling ever was. But it's the first layer. The second layer is that there are all these amazing tools out there. Like you can have entire agent pipelines of like an
Yeah.
agent that does this, and then another, it passes it to that one. So the one that does for marketing, cohort analysis, and then another
Right.
one is I'm going to make custom, advertisements,
I
teaching.
always think it's like the Sorcerer's Apprentice from Fantasia, where the brooms and
Yes.
the buckets of water, and then suddenly you're like, "Whoa, Mickey's in trouble." Yeah.
Yes. So that's the second layer, and that's probably the biggest bang for your buck because it's just learning how to use tools like of a complexity of Photoshop, or maybe not
Yeah.
even a complexity of Photoshop, but oh my
Mhm.
gosh, they're super powerful.
It's like recursion and like meta levels in there that are really
Exactly.
interesting. Yeah.
And they're incredible tools that are not ChatGPT that allow you to do that. They are
Yeah.
custom tool, custom
Mhm.
purposes. You can string them together too. And then the third layer is where you like get into more, let's call it code, or you're using an API and you're coding with it. Now, the thing about vibe coding is that so often people think of vibe coding as like, I just spoke to Replit and I got an app. And
Right.
that's great prototyping. It's incredible what it can do. It's really truly a magic, shocking. But when you're saying, let me build something that's production software, engineers use tools like Cursor. And in Cursor, it's literally you're looking at like snippet of code by snippet of code and saying, is that actually doing what I want it to do?
Right. Right.
And so you have to know
Because slop is real, Matt,
slop is
and
real,
in coding too.
especially and slop makes, by the way, like insecure software that's more hackable, that's buggy,
Yes. Yes.
so slop and code is different.
Technical debt. Right. Yeah.
Yes. So to build a robust piece of production software, yes, AI, it's debatable how, whether it accelerates or not, and that I won't
Yeah.
go into the debate, but wow, clearly we know that's coming. But you have to know how to architect it. You have to know how to read the code and say, is it actually doing what I want it to do? Because if not,
Yeah.
I need to change it to do what I want it to do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to see where the bugs are, and this is complex stuff. So
Yeah.
what you have to learn may be different. Syntax is less important, and you don't have to write everything yourself, but you still have to know how to do this, and you have to be
Yeah.
trained to do that. Because if you take someone who's at level 1 and you say, "Good, go to Cursor," good
Right.
luck. You're not doing
Right.
it, right?
Right. Right.
And yet, the people who know how to do that are superhumans because they
Yes.
can do basically anything empowered by AI.
Right. Right. Which is
So,
it is interesting because you do get almost the perspective of like folks will be on one side or the other of this wave, and the
yep,
sooner you can get their
yep,
agency, motivation, collaborative, creative wheels turning, and then map that back to like a business acumen and a way to kind of operate as like a P&L, like a functioning business in this day and age. That's a pretty powerful combination of skills.
yep. You said a lot of important things in there, but skills, plural, is really important. We just talked about code because that's the one that naturally people think of.
Yeah.
But I'll use an example of like someone who's also in education. And the other day, I saw this jaw-dropping video about kind of his vision for the future of education. Jaw-dropping, so such a cool thing. AI generated top to bottom, the one exception, which was the screenshots of the designs.
Right.
And it was something that would have cost millions of dollars to make.
Yep.
And it basically cost almost nothing. But it wasn't like, let me one shot prompt this. It was incredibly clearly architected, an incredibly tight story. It was clearly a masterpiece of creation.
Yes.
The tools that they were using, they were different tools than the old, like, let me go sit in front of a camera and then let me sit in
Right.
front of Final Cut Pro. They were still sitting in front of a video editor with the snippets and and magnificent. That's an example of like, I want the marketer who can do that.
Right.
That's the one I want.
Right.
And so why aren't we teaching that? And a big
Mhm.
part of the reason we're not teaching that is because so many of the people who are supposed to do the teaching are not even aware that that's something, they're not even aware that that exists.
Right. Yeah.
or they're scared of it. Or they look at Sora 2 and they're like, this is scary because I don't know if Trump is speaking or not, which is all fair.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
genuine, correct, and right.
Right.
But, but they don't understand. Here is how you do that
Right.
thing that makes one's creative vision about the future of education compelling in a way that is now potentially unlocking many, many millions of dollars for
Yeah.
this young person to go literally build the future of education because they had a tool to communicate it in a way that their words alone never could have.
Yeah. And full circle, I think they're engaging with like a maker's mindset. Like they're thinking, these are the systems, this is the emerging technology. Cool. Now, what can I do with it? And how do we almost encourage that agency and get kids to kind of lean in and think about that from an early age? I'm talking to Matt Dalio. He's the founder and CEO of Endless. Endlessstudios.com is the best place to point folks.
Endless Studios is the company. It's the most tactical. There's a really cool game making tool people can download
Yeah,
there.
my wife liked that. Yes.
Oh, good, good. The other one is Endless Global, and it talks about kind of
Okay.
all the activities we have because we also focus on device access in emerging markets, and
Yeah.
it is the more macro view.
Yeah. So we'll include all that in the show notes. And then as folks are heading back to the rest of their lives, Matt, any concluding thoughts, takeaways, ways to wrap up?
I mean, I'll just end on the cliche, which is, the thing that everyone knows already, which is the world is changing. The institutions that are supposed to teach people to get jobs, need to change too. They
Yeah.
do a lot well. There's also, their thread of how do they teach those. The kind of one thing I'll leave you with is just the power of games. And, when most people think of games, they think of playing games. And, I agree. We don't want your average person spending 10,000 hours playing games. It's not that all games are evil, but,
Right.
we want people playing sports and socializing and all those
Yeah.
things. Social media might be evil. That's another one, but, they spend a lot of
Yeah.
time on that one. But when someone sits down to a piece of creation software, whether it's Unity or they're
Yep.
in GitHub or they're in Blender 3D modeling, and they're
Yep.
doing it with a team of people and they're at a computer rather than a passive phone, they are creating, like they are learning the skills that will get them a job. I guarantee you someone who is a virtuoso at those skills will have a job in this future workforce, especially if they know how to use AI to do that job well.
Right.
And so we're thinking about, your youth, whether you're a parent or an educator, school district, like think of games, think of creating games, not playing games, and think of using that to teach all of these skills that are these, highly employable skills.
Amazing stuff. Matt Dalio, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode.
Thank you for having me.
And for our listeners, you liked what you heard, write us a review, tell your friends, share the good word. We'll be back again soon. This is Trending in Education.